Good afternoon, Numi Nation. Welcome to episode 17, 17. Can you believe it? 3.5 weeks into New Minds TV, and it keeps getting better and better. Like all of you, I'm navigating this new home office environment, and I've made several pivots and tweaks and adjustments, and I'm not done yet. I've got some ideas to make it better, but one thing I brought in for filming is this giant photography light. You can't see it, of course, that one of my kids has that I have borrowed, that put behind the computer, and it's made a great positive impact on the lighting for my shoots. But at the same time, it's like the full moon is in my face. So if I sort of phase out and seem to go, into hypnosis, it's probably because it's the moon camera just searing me right there. Okay. Hey, welcome to episode 17. Something a little bit different this afternoon. Man, if you missed, of course, it's my job to brag on every episode, right? It's my job. But if you missed episode 16 yesterday, I interviewed Kathy Cordero. It was kind of the culmination of our homeschool hacks week. Oh my goodness, what a resource, what a wisdom source Kathy is. And we're going to bring her back for sure, but go back and watch episode 16. It's full of insights about maximizing your homeschool experience, your involuntary homeschool experience. So we had quite a day today on New Minds TV. Mr. Justin kicked it off this morning talking about this beautiful term. He got it from Mr. T, one of our inspirators, who I don't think originally coined it. I don't know where it came from originally, but we're going to use it. Quaranteaching, right? And it's this kind of the way of describing this sort of involuntary new reality of, teaching at home. You didn't volunteer yourself and go down this deep research path that a lot of people do and make a big life decision that I'm going to homeschool. This was just thrust upon you. So how can you make the most of this situation? That's quaranteaching. So Mr. Justin has some gems in there this morning. Miss Kristen carried on the PHP. That's the Parent Power. No, PPA. Sorry, my acronym. Parent Power Hour was rocking this morning as well. As always, Miss Kristen goes deep. It's so conversational. It really, after a couple of minutes, you feel like you're just having coffee with Miss Kristen. It's it's amazing, and it's amazingly relaxing too. It's very conversational, It's not snippety and sort of, little shortcuts, buzzwords. There's key words in there, but it's really conversational and deep. And then the inspirators were on fire today, as usual, right? I got to tune into Mr. Adam. His dungeon verse took a turn towards space, and they were kind of introducing some storylines that were in space. Just fantastic stuff all around. You can travel around the world on any given day with Mr. Walter. Right? He never lets us down. Mr. Dorian is the go-to steam dude every morning and afternoon. It's all there, folks. And now that things are a little bit settling, we're deep into this is going to be a rough week in a lot of ways. I can feel it. I could feel it on Sunday, actually. And I'm not just talking about the news. It's talking about cases peaking and things like that. I just mean that 2 weeks, in a situation is kind of psychologically we can create this structure of we're coping temporarily. But once you're into week 3 and beyond, this is a little bit more than kind of mental vacation from reality. This is the new reality, and it starts to sink in. It's going to be rough, folks. There's going to be some tension. There's going to be some friction in your family, in your work family. I think it's going to happen. So that's where all these tools you've been throwing down are going to really come to the test. And can you implement something? Can you try something? And the message from yesterday from Kathy, can you implement grace, self-grace and self-compassion and compassion towards your kids and your family members and your team members? And let's go ahead and draw that ring all the way around planet Earth, if you don't mind. the sphere of grace and compassion, can we just put it around the planet right now? I think that would help everybody. Okay, enough intro stuff. I want to get to the juice of today, which is kind of fun. It's book recommendations, a little bibliotherapy. Now, that's a super fancy word we drop all the time, and it makes us sound so official. Bibliotherapy. I'm not a bibliotherapist, but I play one on New Minds TV, right? That kind of thing. It's it sounds really formal. You don't actually have to be a certified psychologist or psychiatrist to do bibliotherapy. It's just a really, really fancy way of saying using books and literature to relate to your world, to cope with your world, to explore your world and that means your inner world as well. That's bibliotherapy. So something came up last week that kind of triggered me that I knew this week I wanted to do an episode on this. I was chatting with a parent and he was talking about how he had pulled a specific book off his shelf for he and his kid to read together that had a lot of meaning for them, because in this book, it was a piece of literature, it was fiction, but in this book, the characters had to deal with a very topsy-turvy, crazy situation. And reading that book helped him and his kid feel like part of something bigger. That is the power of literature. So what I did is I put a call out to our New Minds TV crew and I asked, hey guys, I'm going to do an episode on, books that we recommend for tough times. So I'm calling it Good Lit for Tough Times. I feel like I should pause there and then there should be a little jingle. Do, 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 do. And then whenever I do a feature of literature, I'll say that phrase and then we'll get the little jingle, right? We're not there yet. We'll get there. Okay. We'll get there. We're going to get a professional producer picking us up sooner rather than later. And you'll get all the jingles, folks. I promise. But I want to get to the presentation because we got some cool book recommendations to drop. Now, remember, this is a specific context. This isn't like, hey, tell us your favorite book of all time. No. Different category. I specifically asked for, hey guys, books that you would recommend that you think particularly would relate to this moment in time and history that would help people manage, cope, understand, grow. That was the criteria. So that's what we're getting. All right. So let's go see what we got. I'm going to go ahead and toggle our view here. I want to show you a good old presentation that I put together. I'm going to go ahead and go into presentation mode, and we'll start talking about, these literature recommendations. So go to the top there. So like I said, the title of this segment, Good Lit for Tough Times. These are recommendations straight from the New Minds TV crew. I'm going to give shout outs to the crew as well, the ones who recommended it, and just remind you of their shows, right? And how you can tune in on any given weekday. For crying out loud, is such a resource out there. It's an embarrassment of riches over here at New Minds TV. Okay, this came from Miss Kaylee, The Tao of Pooh. And I've read this myself several years ago and I loved it, and it had completely fallen off my radar. And I thought, whoa, Miss Kaylee, you tuned in to something very powerful. And this was her quote. So Taoist philosophy comforts me in times of crisis, and I love that it's so easily explained with one of our favorite snuggly childhood heroes. So guys, like Winnie the Pooh is like the literature version of comfort food, isn't it? I mean, for a lot of us, it's a cultural reference, right? But for me personally, I know for my own kids and for a lot of people I know, Winnie the Pooh is just like literary comfort. It's like a little hug with a teddy bear. It's like you got Pooh there with you, right? And so, in other words, what Kaylee's saying here is combine that Pooh factor with, the Taoist philosophy, which is all about resilience and insight and rolling with the flow and getting into flow and balance. And what a great, now this is not written for kids. It is kid friendly, but this is kind of more geared towards the adults or maybe teenagers. And there's also a sequel called The Taya Piglet. It's also good, but nice recommendation from Miss Kaylee. Miss Kaylee, you might have seen on the Dungeonverse. She she sometimes subs in for Mr. Adam. I'm sure you'll see her a lot more on New Minds TV. She did a cool mythical creatures episode of the Dungeonverse show last week. And she's a long-time New Minds inspirator. So thank you, Kaylee, for that one. What do we got next? Oh, Mr. T. So Mr. T, you actually have met a couple of times. Last Friday on Mr. Justin's Vault show, he made a cameo. And yesterday, he jumped on with me at 4 for the Vault. And we did some world creating with Ed Emberley drawings. So Tuck Everlasting, of course, is kind of a classic. It still appears in schools. A lot of middle schools or maybe even high school lit classes are studying this gem. And there's a good reason, right? And so here's how Mr. T put it for us. A timeless, he says no pun intended, but come on, Mr. T. How long have I known you? That was totally planted pun, okay? If you haven't read it, then you won't get the pun, but if you have, you will. A timeless tale that poses the dilemma, would you choose to live forever if you never change from the moment you stop dying? He says it's a story to reread every 3 years because your views and understanding constantly evolve. And this is a powerful piece of insight about literature in general. This idea that the greatest literature out there is almost like, I don't know, like a magical prism. You read it once, the first time you encounter it, it makes some kind of impact. And then, wow, a few years later, it's like you're looking at the prism from a slightly different angle and you're seeing a whole different display based on where you're coming from, right? And Mr. T saying that Tuck Everlasting is one of those. By the way, I didn't have time I didn't have space to include it in his comments, but he highly recommends avoiding the movie in this case. You're going to see another recommendation coming up where the movie is kind of like New Minds certified, you know, not Rotten Tomatoes. This movie is New Minds Rotten Tomatoed. So we recommend stick to the book. It's a good read. It's timeless. It's going to have riches for everybody. No matter what your angle, you're going to see kind of the magic. All right. Thank you, Mr. T, for that one. Okay. Mr. Justin, this is a powerful one. So I don't know if you thought about this, but there actually are a lot of interesting parallels to the story of Anne Frank, kind of being sequestered and in hiding up in her annex, which I've been to, by the way, which is absolutely powerful. If you're in Amsterdam, I really recommend that experience. In fact, what I did was on my flight over to Europe, I reread, you know, the Diary of Anne Frank because I knew I'd be visiting. And so it was so fresh in my mind, and just seeing that confined small space where she and her family survived. Anyhow, what Mr. Justin brings to the table is an interesting perspective. So I know a lot of us have read the Diary of Anne Frank at some point in our school career. I think less common is for us to have read Anne Frank Remembered, which is actually the story as told by Miep Geist, and she is the woman of the family that actually hid the Frank family. And Mr. Justin says it provides an amazing perspective on the story and certainly allow for bibliotherapy. So that's what I was talking about, is the bibliotherapy factor of, wow, let's relate. You know, it's not about over-relating. And what Mr. Justin suggests is that this is a little bit softer landing than the actual diary, which can take a dark turn if you try to over-relate it to the current situation. But yeah, so nonfiction, right? Nonfiction, the power of nonfiction in this case, for us to relate. Bibliotherapy, for us to make sense of our world. So thank you, of course, Mr. Justin from the Start Your Day Every Day and from the Vault 2 or 3 times a week. So thank you, Mr. Justin, for that jam. That's beautiful. Okay. Mr. Walter from the inimitable Around the World with Mr. Walter. So every day at 2 o'clock, Mr. Walter takes us on somewhere around the planet. And this one, I inserted the photo that he sent. Like when I made the call out for, book recommendations. This is all he did was send the photo of himself holding the book. Who Moved My Cheese, right? I'll read the subtitle because you probably can't see it based on the size. An amazing way to deal with change in your work and in your life. Oh, wow. That sounds really relevant, Mr. Walter. Thank you for that. Absolutely. So I've read this. I read this, many, many years ago, actually, when I was still in the corporate environment. It was like a required book study. And very, good advice and insight on how to deal with change and unwanted change. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mr. Walter. I think a lot of parents could find value in this. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but I think they might have made a teens edition. Who Moved My Cheese? Teen, how they do all like when a bestseller in this category kind of gets big, they do a teen edition or a kid adapted edition. I think there might be one of these for teens. But nice call, Mr. Walter. Thank you. And of course, you guys know Mr. Walter from Around the World every day at 2. Okay. Gotta love this. We can't leave out the youngest among us. Or maybe the point here is that we should all dig in to the deep recesses of our childhood imagination. This is Mr. Dorian, Harold and the Purple Crayon, right? You guys remember this absolute classic? and imagination and creativity, you know. Good call, Mr. Dorian. Right now he's our steam champ. He does the steam for the younger kids in the morning and does it again in the afternoon. And yeah, why not remember the magic of our roots? And this actually ties into Mr. T yesterday when he came on the vault and he was talking about, the absolute power of just reconnecting with your childhood imagination before all these phrases like I can't, I'm not started to come into our minds and limit us. We used to create entire worlds with no limits. And I think that's what Mr. Dorian is getting at right here is like, guys, read this to your kid, but read it yourself as well, because now's the time to create. Now's the time to use creativity as a bridge. So thank you, Mr. Dorian, for this beauty. Okay. All right. Mr. Adam chimed in and I know you guys know him from the Dungeonverse. So I was fully expecting something in either the fantasy or maybe sci-fi genres, but instead we got this doozy of a classic, Robinson Crusoe, the ultimate story of survival. I remember as a kid reading this for the first time and just being absolutely like riveted. Like the definition of page turner, when I hear that phrase, that's what I go back to as the first time I read Robinson Crusoe for some reason. So it's about resilience. It's about survival. It's about hope, adaptation in extreme circumstances. Here's what Mr. Adams says. I was inspired by the resilience and ingenuity demonstrated throughout the story and the value of companionship as demonstrated through the character of Friday. Yeah, that's that deep story of friendship between Robinson Crusoe and Friday. Yeah, good call, Adam. That's a good one. The tale of isolation and fear seems to resonate with the current state of affairs. Man, that sounds like Adam's ready to write for the Dallas Morning News, right? I mean, that's very well put. Very good connection. If you haven't read this one, and here's the cool thing about Robinson Crusoe, like you see, this is the classic illustrated edition. These are like these little adapted, sometimes they're like little square editions of classic books that they're kind of adapted for younger audiences or, cleaned up a little bit. I mean, I don't want to use the word censored, but they're adapted for the younger kids to get that taste. So even if you have a younger one at home who's, just starting to read, there are versions of this and other classics that you can get them. And why not? Why not a tale of adventure and survival right now? And just kind of be entertained, but escape while resonating with these values. I think that's beautiful. Good call, Mr. Adam. And then Mr. T chimed in again. This is the one that gets the full, 5 stars, the movie and book edition from the New Minds crew. I think unanimously, The Princess Bride. Maybe, this will be controversial, but maybe one of the greatest movies of the modern era. It's got everything right here. I mean, I can't do better than just to read what Mr. T used to describe it. Fencing, fighting, true love, monsters and machines, a few giants, poison, lots of bad men, lots of good men, the most beautiful woman in the world, a brute squad, some swell escapes and captures, death, lies, truth, miracles, and some kissing. Not too much though, if you remember. Strong feelings and superlatives galore. In short, it's about everything and only the good parts. And if you've seen the movie or read the book, some of that, meta language right there will resonate with you. It's about the conversation between, the boy and his grandfather, and just good call, Mr. T. On the surface, it's kind of escapism, but at the same time, there's so many values embedded in there. And it's, the movie, I would dare say, is just as good as the book. Good call, Mr. T. The Princess Bride. You can't go wrong. And Mr. T has chimed in here. The original classic illustrated volumes have been scanned and can be found online. Oh, wow. Nice tip, Mr. T. So going back to Robinson Crusoe, the classic illustrated edition that I was talking about, he says you can find those online now. That's fantastic. Okay. Good call. And thank you again, also, Mr. T, for the Princess Bride making the list. Now, this is another recommendation by Mr. Dorian. It's a poem. It's I'm going to go ahead and click the link and take us there, just so we can read it together. So this is a poem by the poet Wendy Cope. It's from her collection called The Gladdest Thing. And this is The Orange. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and read it for you. Okay? The Orange. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarters and I had a half. And that orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do. Just lately, the shopping, a walk in the park, this is peace and contentment. It's new. The rest of the day was quite easy. I did all the jobs on my list and enjoyed them and had some time over. I love you. I'm glad I exist. Man, what can I or should I even say to Mr. Dorian's like golden nugget that he pulled for us at this poignant moment in time? I mean, it just absolutely resonates with the moment. So beautiful find, Mr. Dorian. That was a glorious addition to our list. And I'm glad that you did that, because let's not neglect poetry, which is a literary form that kind of has that ability to cut through a lot of the layers of noise. It's like half music, half prose in a way. And in that sense, it kind of sometimes can surpass the rational mind and kind of get us right into that space that's a little bit deeper, a little bit more visceral. So Dorian, Mr. Dorian, thank you for that beautiful share, that beautiful gem. And now, lest you think I'm gonna, get out of this, I have some shares of my own. But since it's my segment, I can go ahead and just talk to you directly. So I have a couple as well, and I wanted to get a little bit, come out of left field a little bit. Maybe I can put it that way. Like, okay, I'm a reader. I'm an English major. I've read a lot of books. I mention books too often actually in this segment, so I could have pulled from so many, but there's a certain kind of angle calling me, and it resonates and echoes with some of the other recommendations we got today. And it's more about using the landscape of other worlds and realities to relate to this one and find ourselves some inner space to kind of explore meaning away from sort of like the tightness and the abrasiveness of what we're living right now. So I've got a couple of recommendations that are going to be, for me, they're atypical, right? If you don't know me, then it doesn't matter. But first, I got one for kids and one for adults. So this is my first recommendation. It's called Kingdom of the Golden Dragon. So Isabel Allende is a very, very prolific South American author. She's from Chile originally, and she's very well known and well translated. So you may know her, you may know of her. The House of Spirits was one of her big hit books that got turned into a movie. She's got many, many others. But few people know or have been exposed to this little nugget of a young lit series that she did several years back. And man, this is the English translation. If you happen to be a Spanish speaker, of course, they're all in Spanish too. Kingdom of the Golden Dragon is one of those deep adventure kind of fantasy stories. It's right on the edge of fantasy and realism, where it's like the way she portrays it is like so on the edge that it like kind of like interlopes and fuses together, which for me is the best kind of fantasy, where it's just at the edge of what could or could not be real. And it's a story of adventure, of intrigue, of loyalty, of friendship, of bravery, of courage, of discovery, of mystery, of wonder, of having to take risks, of having to grow, and just all that. But to boot, just a really cool fantasy adventure story. And I think it's very underappreciated and underknown, which is why I'm putting it out there. So Isabel Allende, Kingdom of the Golden Dragon. This is just one in the whole series. They work as standalones, so you could go straight to this one. But I kind of recommend checking out the whole series, okay? Another one I'm going to pull, and this will be my final one of the day, then we'll wrap it up, is more for adults. It could definitely work for teens or like secondary students of that age. It's kind of considered a classic in sort of like the self-development realm, but it really kind of, transcends any particular genre. It's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian wizard, I think they call him on the back. Yeah, the Brazilian wizard makes books disappear from stores. Yeah, he sure does. So he's super prolific. I don't know how he writes so much, but this particular one is really a core classic. And the reason that this one was kind of calling to me is this whole concept of alchemy is about transformation. It's about taking something raw and crude and alchemizing it or transforming it into something gold. In the metaphor of alchemy, it's transforming something into gold. But as a metaphor, you can take that as anything, transforming a situation, a relationship, an event into gold. And so that's why I recommend this for the adults out there to kind of really explore this idea of kind of like what's in this situation right now that's putting things on our inner landscape that we can alchemize, that we can transform. Yeah, not to get too far deep, but The Alchemist is definitely a recommendation that I think is relevant and powerful for the moment and times. And what can I say? That was good lit for tough times. What I'm going to do is just one more time really quickly go through the list of recommendations. Now, we spent quite a bit of time on each book, but just one more time for those people who might have just tuned in or who want the summary. Let's go look. So there we are. This was Mr. Dorian's like absolute golden find, the poem by Wendy Cope called The Orange. Now let's just go one more time. Okay, so there's the orange. We had The Princess Bride by William Goldman, recommended by Mr. T. We had Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, recommended by Mr. Adam. We had Harold and the Purple Crayon, again, Mr. Dorian, another super great insight. Who Moved My Cheese? What can you say, Mr. Walter? Nice pick. Anne Frank, Remembered by Miep Gies, recommended by Mr. Justin. Tuck Everlasting, a classic. Tuck Everlasting, a classic that Mr. T put back on our radar as relevant for the times. And finally, Miss Kaylee, The Tao of Pooh. It's like a hug of ancient Eastern philosophy that's so friendly and soft. So thanks for that, Miss Kaylee. Thanks for the whole team for your recommendations. And the idea here is, like I said, for me, it was a conversation with a parent that last week that just reminded me of the power of literature to comfort us in difficult moments. And then I thought, wow, we are a team of readers at New Minds TV. So why not leverage that? Let's offer something up for the world and share. But guess what? We're just a handful of people who happen to be the New Minds TV crew. You guys are millions. Please, please, please give us your ideas and insights and links to books and reads that you think are good lit for tough times. We'll share them when we get them. In fact, in this segment throughout the week, as those come in, I'm going to profile and share them as more offerings come in. So send them our way. We want to know. Let's crowdsource this. If you're like me, when you walk into a bookstore, it's this strange excitement tinged with like a deep melancholy. For me, it's the realization that, wow, even if reading was my full-time job from now until my last breath, I wouldn't get through 1/10 of these books. And there's so much richness out there. So we have to like allocate our time intelligently. Like, what are we going to put our energy into to read? The wisdom is out there in so many forms. So that's why I'm saying, let's crowdsource this. Let's help each other bump books up to the top of our list to get the most out of the situation. There it is, folks. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of End the Day. Episode 17, episode 18 tomorrow. You got the same awesome lineup. And since tomorrow's Wednesday, we actually kick off the day at 8 a.m. U.S. Central with Steam and Arabic. And then the rest of the fantastic lineup ensues from there. Thanks for tuning in to New Minds TV. It's the home of real inspired learning. You can find us here on Facebook. I could say here on Facebook, here on YouTube, here on newminds.tv, because you could be watching this from any of those platforms. We're all over. New Minds TV isn't about one place. It's about a vision. It's about a mission. And you can find us anywhere where you like to digest information and videos, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or the website. Okay, folks, follow your passion until it becomes your talent, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 18.